This is Channel 4. Now, the Heart of the Dragon samples the rural way of life led by 4/5 of the Chinese people.
There's a saying in the countryside that the early morning contains the essence of the whole day. Mrs. Hu is one of 800 people living in Mao Ping, a mountain village in southeast China. Like 4 out of 5 of all Chinese, she's officially classified as a peasant. They don't worry about being called peasants here. In Chinese, the word literally means farm people. If there's sunshine in the morning, they'll be making noodles at the mill. They hang them in the sun to dry. Noodles were popular in China long before Marco Polo took them back to Italy and called them pasta. The Chinese considered their length to be symbolic of a long life. Mrs. Hu brought a basket of her own wheat flour from home. It's exchanged for the same weight of noodles, and she pays a few fen for the processing. What are the important things in life for someone like Mrs. Hu? Where and how does she live? How does she spend her time? When you look at the life of a peasant, you're seeing something fundamental about living in China. Both the old and the new. Mao Ping is lucky in its geographical surroundings. It lies in a beautiful valley in the province of Zhejiang. The land is fertile and produces good rice, and the mountains provide income from timber and firewood and charcoal. They say that the land that supports them is like a mother who nourishes her children. The land gives people a deep sense of continuity. It links the generations. Country people always want to be buried on their land. It's thought of as a great misfortune to grow old and die and not be buried close to your birthplace. Three-quarters of all the people in Mao Ping are called either Fang or Hu. These are the two big village clans. Their members are descended from common ancestors, so they have the same family names. It's a characteristic of the Chinese to consider themselves less as individuals than as components of a group, above all of the family group. The clan, the household, the family. These are the basic building blocks of village society. Mrs. Hu was born in another village. When she was 20, she got married and came to live with her husband's family in Mao Ping. She's been here 35 years. She has 3 sons and 2 married daughters, and she recently became a grandmother. But she and her husband are only one branch of the Hu family in the household. His 2 brothers and their wives and children and grandchildren all share the same house. Altogether, 4 generations live under the same roof. At their head, Mr. Hu's old mother, 86 years old and the oldest woman in Mao Ping.
我是民兵干部屯支部书记，我姑姑是农委局人。我第2个姑姑呢，她是搞文艺工作，她喜欢拉五金的，文艺工作，她喜欢打龙敲鼓，她喜欢这一类的。所以我们呢，一家不分家的，都是一家的。我妈妈管家，我3兄弟，很高兴的翻身了，是吧？经济上也翻身了，政治上也翻身了。
The 3 brothers and their families live round a shared courtyard. The house is very spacious, like many in Mao Ping, and they're always adding to it.
我们3姐兄弟分开来了，分到3个早上了，我们烧完了啊，我们人们都大家都起来了啊，30来个人，我们都起来，我们分开来了，分到3个早上烧完了，啊，然后哥哥们自己来里烧完了啊，然后哥哥们弟2个。 我们弟2个姑姑的来里烧完，这里烧个。呢，给你们吃饭，和司机在这里吃饭，里烧。哥哥们更大锅。 那个酒日跑跑吃个，我们都是麦子，做面个麻，然后哥哥的那个麻粉，哈，那种麻粉做面，吃个面条吃个啊，然后这2个地方嘛都是自己一个纸摆在的啊，然后可惜的没得。 在那咸阳的东西吃个东西，看那个戏。那这里是几块高的地方，啊，看那个的，俺们喝。我大儿子在部队里没有回来啊，哥哥们大个有那个华山，啊，哥哥们大女了在这期红卫龙集团的，在这里来的保管那个仓库，啊，哥哥们就是这个大儿子呢，查资源过来，你来的开查资。
Mrs. Hu's youngest son, Li Lin, is recovering from an operation. He fell down a mountain and damaged his liver. By the time he gets married, there won't be any more room in the family house, so his parents recently built an extension next door for him and his brother.
那么我们呢，分到这个房子，大家都有山啊、田啊都分到了啊，那么大家都帮手，互相帮手，拆掉。 啊，再重新烧，给它升高， 上面这个没有啊，还是原来的，下面这个都是给它升高，升出新房子，这个还要新盖的，大家来帮忙的。
The Chinese have a proverb about mutual dependence. To build a house, it goes, you need the help of other people. When a family needs a new house and has been allocated some land by the commune, all their friends and relations lend a hand. The building methods haven't changed for generations. The house is mainly built of timber from the mountains. The main frame was designed and the sections cut by a traveling carpenter who left it ready to assemble like a kit. No nails, no screws. A local mason carved the round pillar stones. And the outside walls are made of earth and lime, tamped down in a wooden mold. It's quick and cheap to build, but the houses last a long time. The total cost of this one will have been 1,000 yuan. That's less than 350 pounds. When the frame of the house was finished, they gave the traditional party. The paper signs wish the family good luck and quote from Chairman Mao. This one says, hard work builds the future. The most powerful man in Mao Ping is the Communist Party secretary, Fang Benzhen. In the new revolutionary jargon, the village is known as a production brigade, one of 5 that make up the local commune. Secretary Fang keeps his ears close to the ground. In the old days, the village headman was known as the father-mother official, and the peasants his children people. Secretary Fang has considerable power, but he prefers to see himself less as a political commissar than as a benevolent father figure. He's not only responsible for the ideology and discipline of the brigade members, it's his job to see that the party's agricultural policies are carried out and to deal with day-to-day problems. Peasants tend to have little interest in politics. They want security and a quiet life. The last 30 years of communist rule have not been all that easy, and yet nobody would deny that there have been benefits. In the past, few village children went to school. Education cost money and meant the children couldn't help in the fields. Now, the government is hoping there will be primary education for every child in the country within 10 years. The state provides the teacher, the brigade provides the schoolhouse, and the parents pay for the books. Learning to read and write Chinese is not easy. Each word or character has to be learned by heart and patiently copied again and again. You need to know about 3,000 characters to read a newspaper.
那么我呢，从小起跟另外一个爸爸妈一句书没有念过，没有本钱念书，所以我到现在一个字也不识。啊，那么干啥个活呢？自己没有土地，生活困难，家里没有土地，只有一间房子还是很小的，一间房子。那么给人家呢看牛，啊，一直看牛呢看到15岁。 啊，看到15岁呢，再回来呢，到家里呢，我们就是担那个摊来，啊，一直担摊来呢，担到解放来。
Everything in South China comes second to rice. Mao Ping has just enough acres of paddy to feed its own population. They grow 2 crops of rice and 1 of winter wheat in these fields. It's early October, and the second of the year's rice harvests will soon be underway. They're starting to cut some fields already. In the days of Mao Zedong, agriculture was collective. The harvest belonged to everyone, and there was little incentive for the individual. But in 1981, all that changed. Now, each family takes responsibility for what it produces. Mrs. Hu's family has been allocated half an acre of paddy to plant and tend and harvest. Rice needs constant and careful irrigation. They pay a small fixed tax, but all the rice they grow is their own. The harder they work, the more they'll have. It'll be another week or 2 before their rice is ready to cut. The villagers eat a staggering amount of rice, anything up to 2 pounds of it each day. That's 3 or 4 times their own body weight in uncooked rice each year. If rice is one symbol of southern China, bamboo is another. Painters are inspired by its elegance. Poets say it grows as straight as an upright man. For the villagers of Mao Ping, it means money. This week, Li Sen, Mrs. Hu's middle son, with other members of the No. 8 production team, is cutting bamboo. Last week, he was felling timber. The villagers have been cutting bamboo for centuries. Now it's all part of a government economic plan. Mao Ping has to sell a minimum quota to the state each year. But just as there's now an incentive to grow more rice, Li Sen will be paid for the amount of bamboo he cuts. If he works hard, it can be quite lucrative. The Chinese value bamboo for its versatility. It is strong and light and supple. It's used for furniture, matting, baskets, prams, shoulder poles, cooking utensils. There's no end to the variety of uses they find for it. And it's needed all over the country. It's harder work than it looks. Each of them is carrying more than 50 kilos, almost their own weight in bamboo. And it's nearly 3 miles back to the village and the midday meal. Meal times are when the Hu family comes together. Lunch is the main meal of the day. Food supply has always been precarious in China, at the mercy of flood or drought or government policy. And a century of upheaval has reinforced their folk memories of starvation. So mealtime for peasant families is almost a religious ritual. It encapsulates the 3 most important things in their lives: the home, the family, and food. They're building a small power station high up above the river near Mao Ping. Mr. Hu was an engineer in the army, and he's been asked to supervise the workmen. He doesn't earn any more than he would in the forest, but the job gives him status, and that's almost more important than money. Most afternoons, Mrs. Hu and the other women in her family sit and talk in the courtyard. The party insists that men and women are equal in the new China. But that doesn't mean that they abandon their traditional roles. For the next generation, things may be very different. The new one-child policy will bring great change to family life. But so far, the pattern of life for the women of Mao Ping, at least on the surface, has not changed all that much.
我一天不吃，我天天的烧饭，我天天我去烧这些呢，回家来烧这些，烧这些嘛，哪里给你开水关了嘛，堆起来一道都得堆开水，给你开水堆好嘛，饭烧饭就到回家来烧饭，咱们一日三餐都要烧嘛，啊，咱们还有个拌菜，俺们天天的嘛炒菜嘛，个人各个菜都要炒过一个菜。 搁家一天就是搁家一年拌菜啊，烧三餐饭，要几个6餐饭的啊，都得3餐锅里要烧的呢，啊，他们出去还有个人别来别去烧。
But Mrs. Hu is not complaining. There's an air of confidence and strength about these women. They know that family life revolves around them. They usually control the purse strings. They have authority within the household. It's said that if a husband is the outside master, back home his wife is the inside master. If you're unwell in Mao Ping, there's a clinic you can go to. It's part of what used to be an old temple. Mrs. Hu's sister-in-law believes her vital force is out of balance and wants a checkup.
再来一只手。你这个病啊，除了要消炎的话呢，那些药片还要补一下，啊，属于亏症。现在农村那个老年性那个气管炎还比较多。
The young rural doctor is one of several from the commune hospital who take it in turns to spend a month in Mao Ping. He had 18 months medical training when he left school. He relies on a mixture of traditional and Western methods of treatment.
现在给你开个处方啊。你姓什么叫什么？今年多大了？
Medical care is not free in the countryside. She pays a small fee for the consultation and half the actual cost of the drugs.
除了打针还吃点药啊。
Were she to need an operation, she'd have to pay half the cost of that. It could amount to a year or two's earnings and be financially crippling to the family.
现在还做个青霉素试验。
They'll be needing baskets and drying mats as the rice harvest gets into full swing. A family of traveling basket makers has arrived. It's a traditional skill they still hand down to their children. Since the government now encourages private initiative, craftsmen like these are becoming increasingly mobile. Their work is usually of a much higher quality than what's available in the shops, and their prices are competitive. They're welcomed by the villagers. For most people, making a living is still very hard work. Half their lives are spent carrying heavy loads. They say it's their shoulders that earn them their keep. The work they do and when they do it is dictated by the seasons, by the weather, by the hours of daylight. It's a relentless, age-old cycle. Life for the villagers may sometimes look idyllic on the surface, but it's also a treadmill. If they get the chance to find other work, they'll often take it. This small factory, started by the villagers themselves, produces bakelite moldings. Mrs. Wang is the manager of the factory. She's also the deputy party secretary. She chooses the lucky girls who work here. She takes into account their family circumstances, their ability to be punctual, and above all, what she calls their good ideology. It's not easy, she says, to teach peasants to become factory workers.
这个嘛，开始呢，比较呢困难一点，因为是呢，我们大家呢在农业生产上面呢，大家呢劳动呢自由呢比较习惯的哈。后来呢，我们呢又干部开会，开了以后想办法呢定出条件，因为这个东西呢，同那个工业里面就形成了一样的，做呢是我们大队里面做这个工种呢，跟那个大工厂差不多的，他不好迟到几分钟，这里呢要提前呢10分钟。
As greater prosperity comes to the countryside and better education, the authorities face a potential problem. China's economy relies on the peasants to feed the nation. But won't this generation have different ambitions? At school, the children are taught to respect manual labor. It's one of the basic aims of what they call moral education.
你们现在看啊，长大以后准备做什么？骑水鹰。当一个歌唱家。 马文勇，
我长大了，准备做一个勤劳勇敢的农民。
我想你很好啊，准备做农民，就是继承父母的遗志，就是要把老一辈的革命家精神培养起来。同学们都知道，在解放初期，1959年的时候，我们伟大的主席刘少奇同志亲自接见了 清洁工人史传强同志，并且同他紧紧握手，亲自交谈。他讲：“你扫垃圾、搞卫生是人民勤务员，我们当主席也是人民的勤务员。这是革命的分工不同，在社会主义革命当中都是不可缺少。所以同学们从这里我们可以看出， 在我们社会主义的国家里，劳动和劳动人民是平等的，没有高低贵贱之分。
The big building in the center of Mao Ping that used to be the landlord's house is now the brigade headquarters. Once a week, the Communist Party branch committee meets to discuss village affairs.
我们现在都有好少数的学员一起来的，给完到了，是完到给起来了，是都是7、8斗去8把，来去，那么看起来了，今年子6、6年了，7、8、6年了， 看起来是一个大风水的一个年纪。
These are the people who run Mao Ping. Secretary Fang and his deputy, Mrs. Wang, with the brigade leader and 4 others.
那么有时呢，水源缺少。
The committee is much less concerned with ideological questions than it would have been in the past. Their basic task is to implement the policies that are decided in Peking and put them into practice at the grassroots level.
啊，这个争取呢，都贡献国家的这个田园的建设。啊，都这个争取呢，贡献呢这个国家这个田园的建设。啊，那么特别现在来讲呢，这个电的问题呢，这个比较重要。啊，那么我们呢，电量也要电，开机器也要电，都需要电。
这个呢，这个今朝呢，我们这2个部分，是不是啊？暂时这个第1个部分我们已经研究过了，是不是啊？这里呢，大家仔细听。在全面开展新革命的各项任务中。
Today, the official policy is pragmatism. How to increase production and persuade people to work hard. It may offend some of the old Maoists, but revolutionary purity is no longer the top priority. Now, it's the making of money. The rice field is soaked with the sweat of peasants, says a famous Chinese poem. Remember that the food on your plate is all hardship, every grain of it. Harvesting rice is back-breaking work, but this year, they say, it doesn't feel quite so bad. At last, after more than 20 years of collective farming, each family is simply working for itself. The so-called responsibility system has been in operation for 12 months now, and the people of Mao Ping and their leaders are in no doubt as to its success.
那我们以前还没搞出人之前，我们这里给使用了哈，在这个土地上了哈，他在劳动人不给你，这个出勤，啊，到出力你不给，出勤也有的，啊，那我们以前呢都是吃大锅饭的思想。每一个哈，使用无压了。 那么都能跟水果去找了盐，能够水果的干活了是有水果的死主人，那么干起来个粮食都能给你水果呢，自己一苦是一苦了，啊，那么现在你说了这能给水果呢都拿都得。
Shao Dexian has looked after the accounts in Mao Ping since the days of land reform in the early 1950s. His ledgers are proof that the more realistic view of human nature taken by the present leadership in Peking is paying off. This year, they've earned just over 200 yuan a head in the village. That's about 70 pounds, and close to the national average. And it's not only the production of rice and timber that's affected. Mrs. Hu grows all the vegetables she needs on her own private plot. Each family is allocated a patch of land to use as they please. They are now positively encouraged to supplement their income by selling vegetables or by raising chickens or pigs. They call it domestic sideline production, and it puts extra cash in their pockets. All this means there's more money around. The villagers are no longer so dependent for their diet on what they can grow. Many people now have some savings in the bank. They have become consumers, and there's more for them to spend their money on than there used to be. The commune has recently opened this shop in Mao Ping. They're very proud of it. They call it their department store. It's a sign of how things are changing. Many things, of course, remain the same. It'll be a long time before the new prosperity affects the nature of their working lives. Mechanization is costly and manpower is cheap. There are 800 million peasants in China to be kept employed. The country people distrust machinery anyway. Peasants can almost never get permits to live in a town. The nation needs them to stay where they are. So they'll go on working as they have done for generations. The children of these men who bring down the charcoal from the high mountain kilns will probably do just the same. They will rely upon their shoulders and their muscles and the strength in their bodies. When Mr. Hu needs a haircut, he goes to Ye Guanjing, the village barber. He's a barber because he was born with one arm deformed and couldn't do heavy work. He's lived alone since his mother died. No peasant family wanted their daughter to marry a man who is physically weak. But he's made himself a living and he doesn't complain. By 5 o'clock in October, the sun is getting low. The men will soon return from the fields and the mountains. It's the same routine every evening. Mao Zedong was fond of extolling the nobility of peasant life. They may have dirt on their hands, he said, and cowshit on their feet, but they are the purest of all people. It's still ideologically correct to see the peasants in this light, but few of those who live in the cities would want to change places with them. The work is extraordinarily hard. The routine is inexorable. There's nowhere to go and little to do except work. Every day is just like any other. And yet perhaps it's this very sense of routine and rhythm and the unchanging pattern of existence that gives such underlying strength to Chinese peasant life. The rhythm of the seasons, the rhythm of the day, the rhythm of the family. For Mrs. Hu, it's what living is essentially about. There never used to be much to entertain them in the evenings. But now at last they've got television in Mao Ping. There are 4 sets in the village, and it's standing room only every night. What can they be thinking of when they look at the world that lies beyond Mao Ping? They're absorbed by what they see, but how enticing is it? All that is most important about village life depends on continuity. So far, it has survived a century of turmoil and revolution. But will the recent changes make them long for new horizons? Or will they want to settle even deeper into the life they've always known?